Hi, this is Dovid Orlofsky, and welcome to Project Inspire 2021. What a pleasure it is not to be here with you. This is a virtual convention, and what can I tell you? Having a little trouble making eye contact with some of you out there since I don't see anybody. But this is COVID. This is the new reality. You know, we have to try to connect in a way that is disconnected, right? A little bit of a contradiction there. So when I was asked to speak at Project Inspire this year, I said, okay, what are we going to talk about? And I thought, what a great thing to talk about. Connections. Because isn't that what Kiruv is about? Kiruv is l'karev, to come close. And in our minds, somehow that means the frum community reaching out to the non-frum community. But that's not what it's about. It's about connections with all of us. So let's start off with a little Torah, can't go wrong. A little idea on Purim. So in yeshivas, they have what's called the Mishmar. Right? Mishmar is Thursday night. People stay up and learn later than they usually do. Right? Some places go till 12:01. Some places stay up all night. There used to be towns in Europe where the whole town stayed up all night and learned the whole night, the whole Thursday night, Mishmar. And one of the things they would do is they'd give you a particular shaila, what they called the Mishmar shaila, to sit and work on. And Rabbi Steinberg was famous for this. In fact, he put out a series of svarim called Mishmeres Chaim, which is just a collection of his Mishmar shailas that people used to sit and work on. So he asked the following question. We have a concept in halacha called amatona amanas lahachzir. It's a technicality. What does that mean? I give you a gift and it's completely yours on condition that you give it back to me. So if you don't give it back to me, it was never yours. It's only yours if you give it back to me. Well, that doesn't seem terribly practical. How does that apply? So we know this applies on Sukkot. You have to, on the first day of Sukkot, own the lulav and esrog. V'lekachtem lochem has to belong to you. So I give you my lulav and esrog. I have to give it to you completely. But of course, what if you're a wise guy and you decide to walk off with it? So I give it to you as a matona al manas la'achzir. It's yours. You can now shake it and it belongs to yours, but it only is yours if you give it back to me. So asks Steinberg, can I send you shalach manas as a matana manas lahachzir? I give you the shalach manas, and it's yours only if you give it back to me. Now, some of the shalach manas we get, I think that would only add to the simcha, right? Because you don't want these things. In fact, the repackagers out there, you know that you could send somebody a shalach manas, and then it makes the rounds among 5, 6, or 7 people until you finally get it back yourself. You think somebody would have had the decency to at least remove your card from inside of it, but anyway, can I give it to you as a matana al manas lahachzir? I remember many years ago seeing this scene with Groucho Marx where a guy's walking by with a drink for somebody. He says, I'll take that. And he says, it's for Mr. Jones. So he pulls out a $20 bill. He says, you see this? He goes, oh, yes, sir. He drinks the drink and he says, come back later. I'll let you look at it again. Yeah. So I bring you the shalach manas. Is it nice? It's very nice. Okay. I give it to you. As a matana manas lahachzir, give it back to me. And I just go around to all my friends with the same one shalach manas, giving it to them and taking it back. Now, since technically I have to give you shalach manas, I gave it to you as a matana al manas lahachzir. I took it back. Does that work or not? That's the question. I won't go through all the lumdis, but the conclusion is it does not work. Because the purpose of shalach manas is to make shalom bein ish l'reyehu. And if I give you a gift and I take it back, that doesn't create shalom. That creates richok. It creates bad feelings. Why would you give me something only to take it back? In the words of Mark Twain, a banker is a person who lends you his umbrella and asks for it back when it starts to rain. That's not much of a gift. So if I give it to you with the understanding that I'm going to take it back, it doesn't create shalom. And that's what Shalach Manas is. That's what Purim is. I said this word over at a Project Inspire convention years ago. I apologize for repeating it because I know that everybody watches my speeches over and over and over again. I understand the appeal. I do it too. It's still the most fascinating things out there. I have a particularly wonderful one on the evils of Gaiva that I just watch over and over again because it's probably one of the best shiurim I ever gave. But in any event, there's a idea that Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz says. We all know this from the Shla, where it says Yom Kippurim. Yom Kippur is a Yom Kippurim. It's like Purim. It's like Purim. Yom Kippur, which is such a holy day, is like Purim. It's not even as great as Purim. So, answers Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz in Sichos Musar, that's because on Yom Kippur, it's a time of Achdus. Everybody goes around, apologizes to each other. Sorry I said this. I'm sorry I did that, right? And we come together. That's good. But it's not the same level of Achdus that you get on Purim. Purim is an interactive Achdus. On Yom Kippur, we're not fighting. That's good. But it's not the same thing as the sense of desperation that comes from knowing I need you. Not everybody appreciates that they need people in their lives. And especially today, when things are so distant. Yeah? I saw an interview with Jerry Seinfeld not that long ago. He was a somewhat popular comedian. He had the number one show in America, yeah. And someone asked him, do you think you could make that show today? And he says, no, I couldn't do it today. He says, why would anybody ever walk into anybody's apartment? You know, you had those scenes where Kramer would walk in, you know, and everybody would like, you know, all the interactions. He says, now you would just text. You would text, you would WhatsApp, you would just communicate electronically. People don't have that ability to interact. There was a poignant cartoon in the Hamodia. I think it was 1995, if I recall correctly. I saved it. It showed Purim in Yerushalayim 50 years ago, and you see two people. They're wearing patched jackets. Everybody's barely, but each one's carrying a plate of homemade treats that they're bringing to share with their friend. And now shows you everybody's just sitting on their phone, surrounded by giant packages wrapped in cellophane that they went to some service to deliver. The more you move away, the less Purim is Purim. Purim is supposed to be interaction. It's supposed to be that interface, because there's nothing that brings people together like knowing we're all going to die tomorrow. Yeah, anoshim noshim v'taf b'yoyim echad. One day everyone's going to die. You're dying tomorrow? Me too. You can go first. Yeah, but gentlemen, if we do not hang together, then we will certainly hang separately. We need each other. There's a dependence. So Purim is a time of kesher. Purim is a time of connection. And that is what I want to try to talk about with the time that we have together. How do you connect? How do you connect to family? How do you connect to friends? Tom Lehrer, who was a professor of mathematics in Harvard, who's best known for writing funny songs, which says something about our society. But here's another little tidbit for you. Somebody asked once J.R.R. Tolkien, who of course wrote the Lord of the Rings book series, and he says, how do you think you'll be remembered for all of your work as a philologist in Oxford, or for the Lord of the Rings? He says, for sure, the Lord of the Rings. The fantasy series that I wrote will last much longer than my academic accomplishments. So he was a professor of mathematics in Harvard, but everyone remembers that he wrote funny songs. And in one of his introductions, he said the following. He said, so much of contemporary literature and media talks about people who can't communicate. Parents who can't communicate with their children, spouses who can't communicate with their spouses. And I feel like instead of writing so much about this, if you can't communicate, the least you could do is keep your mouth shut. Yeah, no, we should not. We should learn how to communicate. Dibur. Dibur is kesher. It's always connection. Amira, I can say something without anybody there, but Dibur is a yachas. As Rabbi Moshe Shapiro always used to quote the Mishnah in Ksuvis, Ra'ua midaberes. You saw her talking to somebody. It doesn't mean that they were talking, but that's the word that we use for kesher, for connection. To be able to communicate with somebody, to talk to them. Chaver, a friend, is from the word lechaber, to connect. That's what a friend is. It's a connection. It's figuring out how to form connections with people. In general, what's ahava? Ahava is lekarev. When you love something, you go close to it. You form a kesh with it. When you hate something, you're mirachek. Interesting, counterintuitive thing in psychology. When somebody stares at something, it's because they don't like it. When people are embarrassed to look at something, it's because they desire it. And so they don't want to be caught looking, at this big steak. They want the biggest piece, you know what I mean? I don't want everybody to notice. Yeah, but the more we want something, the more we are mekarev to it. We come close to it. We want that connection to it. That's the difference between Ava and, of course, the difference between Sinah. And that's why Ahava leads to what? Dveikis. Dveikis b'Hashem. Dovak. Where you stick together. So how do we connect? Yeah? It says by Aaron Cohen, Oev Shalom, V'rodev Shalom, Oev Esabrias U'Mekarven L'Torah. How did he bring them to Torah? Oev Esabrias. He loved people. When you love people, then you become close to them. That's the nature of love. Love brings us together. Yeah? Let's face it. Very few people in this world are black and white. Very few people are completely good or completely evil. We're made up of different parts. That's why when an Amora in the Gemara says, I'm a Beinani, and everyone says, oy vey, if you're a Beinani, what does that make me? He doesn't mean that I'm a Beinani and therefore you're a Rasha. What he means is everybody's a Beinani. Because a tzaddik only does good, and a Rasha only does bad. And a Beinani is pulled in two directions. And all of us are pulled in two directions. We're all contradictions. We all have positive and negative parts. Sometimes at the same time. We could do something positive and there's some negative mixed into it. It's the nature of people. People are contradictory. The way that you're makarev to somebody is by looking at the good. And the way that you don't like somebody is by looking at the bad. Do you ever see when people have a fight? Have a fight. Two friends have a fight. Says, I'm never talking to that guy again. Why? Because he's this and he's this and he's this and he's this. And he lists 3 or 4 horrible things about the person. And eventually they make up. And you say, how could you be friends with this person? You just told me all the horrible things. He says, no, he's this and he's this and he's this and he's this, and he tells you all his wonderful things. So which one was true? They're both true. What do you choose to focus on? If you want to love somebody, you focus on all the good. That doesn't mean the bad's not there. But I don't choose to focus on it. Rav Chaim Kreisworth, Zatzal, was the Rav of Antwerp. And a lot of the Jews in Antwerp are involved in the diamond business. And, as in every business, there are rules that most people don't observe. This is always true. There are always a certain number of rules that people don't observe. For example, I had a book once called 100 Ways to Win at Monopoly. This is not terribly important, which explains why I would have a book like this. Yeah. And they say a lot of the strategies is based on the rules. Unfortunately, most people don't keep the rules. So for example, under equipment, yeah, it says there are 12 hotels and 32 houses. Now that might seem pretty innocuous. You could just count them in the box. But he says that's a rule. Therefore, if there are no more hotels in the box, you can't put up hotels. The rules also say a hotel is defined by putting up 4 houses and then adding another house. So you can't build hotels unless you have 12 houses. And if there aren't 12 houses in the box, then you can't put up hotels because there aren't enough houses even though there are hotels. Nobody keeps these rules. Yeah? But there are always rules that exist even though people don't keep it, and it's true in business too. So there was one rule in the diamond business, I really don't know what it was, that nobody really kept, but the government decided to make an example out of this one frum Yid. And they arrested him on these charges. And Reb Chaim Kreisworth came down to meet with the judge. And he says, Rabbi, you have information bearing on this case? And he says, yes, I do. He says, well, I'd love to hear it. So he says, we have a book in our Mishnah called Avos, Ethics of the Fathers. And in there is the following line. Dan ko adam lekafschus. Judge, should have just said judge a person favorably, in which case it should have said Dan adam lekafschus. What's Dan ko adam? It says the only way you can judge a person favorably is by judging the entire person. You can look at any one action that a person does and understand why it's a terrible thing and this is a terrible person. But if you can see kol adam, everything about the person, judge him in his totality, you'll come up with a different idea. So Rabbi Kreisworth said to the judge, I'm here to fill in other aspects of the picture that you need in order to judge this person. Things you may not know about him as a family man, as a community member, as a citizen. You can't just look at this one thing that he did. That's the way that you make connections, by looking at the total picture. A guy comes to me, he's about to go into Jewish outreach. He took a program here in Yerushalayim. He was moving to a town someplace in America. And before he moved, he says, what do you think? Should I divorce my wife before I go or when I get there? Interesting question. I said, why do you want to divorce your wife? He says, because she's terrible. I said, you know what? Let's do an exercise. Tell me 3 good things about your wife. It was an agonizing 2 minutes as he stood there like this. Nope. Can't think of anything. I said, you can't think of anything good? I can meet somebody on the bus and tell you 3 good things about them. And this woman, the mother of your children, yeah, who's cooked for you and cleaned for you and done your laundry and, and all the things for years and years and years, and you can't tell me 3 good things about her? It's because you're so angry. And you're blocking out all of the good. A lot of it comes down to our mindset. Reb Noach Weinberg used to have this thing that he would do where he would say to somebody, do you want to learn about life? Do you want to learn about happiness? Do you want to learn about how to have a meaningful existence? And people would say, sure. He says, I want you to stay for 6 weeks. He says, well, I can't. He says, you can't? He says, no, I have a ticket back. He says, you can change a ticket. In fact, I'll pay the fee. So he says, I have a job. He says, says, what if I paid you $25,000? Could you stay here for 6 weeks? The guy thinks about it and he says, yeah. He says, then you could stay. Just say, I don't want to. So the guy says, okay, I don't want to. He says, but I thought you want to learn about life and learn about happiness, learn about meaning. So don't say I don't want to, say I don't feel like it. He says, okay, I don't feel like it. He says, good. Lesson number 1 to a meaningful life. Do what you want, not what you feel like. If we want to find good in people, you can find good in everybody. Your mind is a tool. You can use it however you want. And therefore, our attitude has to be, not if I feel like connecting to this person or not connecting to this person. I have to connect to this person. I need this person. You ever see 2 people go out to eat and they're both playing on their phones? Neither one of them is talking to each other. People exist inside of these make-believe little worlds, and there's actual people there, and there's no connection. Because I don't think I need you. But if I feel like I need you desperately, I'm depending on you, and your attitude changes. My mother, Orlofsky Shalom, had a wonderful laugh, a very contagious laugh. She was very loud. Yeah. And she was on the plane with her sister, coming from my brother's bar mitzvah. And she was laughing, and the people in front of her turned around saying, be quiet, stop laughing. Well, of course, that just made my mother laugh louder, Anyway, fine. Before they left the plane, they probably said a couple of unsavory things to my mother, and that was it. We came in for the bar mitzvah. We brought in a large group, and we had a bus. We had a tour. We were traveling around. And at one point in the shtachim, the territories, they weren't as dangerous back then, but certainly not as safe. So it was 1975. Anyway, it was getting towards night, and we passed by a minivan that had broken down. And our tour guide says to us, listen, this is not a good place to be at night. Would you mind if we gave these people a ride? And my parents were like, sure, of course. Who is it? The people who were sitting in front of my mother. And they get on the bus, and you can imagine they look a little embarrassed. And my mother says to me, we had some yeshiva guys in the bus, says, everybody sing as loud as you can. And these people were clapping. They were very happy to be on the bus. Their attitude changed. Why? Because they understood that they needed each other. When you come from a point of view that I need you, it's not just if I feel like it, my attitude changes. Maybe one last point we'll make with the little bit of time that we have left. No se ba'olam chaveiro. Help another person carry the burden. There's no better way to connect than when you see somebody in need and you help them. I'm schlepping packages and you go over and you help them with those packages. Doesn't that make a tremendous difference? Doesn't that make a tremendous connection? Most people look at the other person and think, what can they do for me? There's a story in the first Chicken Soup for the Soul where this guy has a new car and he goes to pick up something in a store in a sort of rundown neighborhood, and there's a little kid staring at his new car. He's wearing hand-me-downs, they're too big on him, and he's staring at the car. And he says, you like the car, kid? He says, yeah, where'd you get it? He says, my brother bought it for me. And he goes, I wish... He says, I knew what he was going to say. I wish I had a brother like that. He says, I wish I could be a brother like that. He says, you want to go for a ride? He says, yeah, can we go to our house, my house? So he figures, okay, he wants to show off he's in a new car. So he goes to the house, he says, can you wait 1 minute? And he runs in and he carries out his little brother who can't walk because he had polio. He says, you see, Billy? His brother brought him that car. And one day I'll buy you a car so it'll be easier for you to get around. You want to have a brother like that? Or you want to be a brother like that? So I'll end with a story. I heard this story from Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel's Rabbi. He used to come to my Chumash here. He told me this story. He was there. The first part of the story you can find online. It's a famous story. Howard Schultz writes an email about his trip to Israel, and he met with a lot of important people, him and a lot of these very wealthy Jews. And one of the people they met with was Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel, the Rosh Yeshiva of the Mir. And he asked us, he says, what do we learn from the Holocaust? He says, never again, we have to have a Jewish country. He says, no, what we learned is that 5 Jews can sleep with 1 blanket. You have the blanket. Go back to America and share it with your fellow Jews. Now, Howard Schultz writes this. But the Rabbi told me he came back a second time by himself. And he writes out a check, signs it. And he says, Rabbi, fill it out for whatever you want. At the time, the budget of the Mir was $2 billion a month. I'm sure Rav Nosson Tzvi could have written $2 million, and Howard Schultz wouldn't have blinked. He was a billionaire. He says, I can fill it out for whatever I want. He fills it out for $1,400. He says, take it across the street to that house, that store, and buy a pair of tefillin and put it on every day. That's what you can do for me. Because he didn't want a brother like that. He wanted to be a brother like that. Kira v'chokim, helping our fellow Jews. It's not only people who are religious helping secular. It's all of us connecting to our family, connecting to our loved ones, connecting to our neighbors. And the way we do that is by seeing the entire person and looking for all the good. In Mirza Hashem, in the schus of all of us working together, and hopefully next year this will be in person, because if you haven't been to a Project Inspire convention, the food is great. Trust me, I'm very disappointed. They offered to send me some virtual food, but I find it doesn't have the same taste. In any event, we should all have that shalach manas, have that connection, have all of that power that comes from being Klal Yisrael, and Amir Hashem be zoiche to see an emes geula for us, our family, and all of the Jewish people.